everyone, picking up where I left off last week looking at NECA's Predator line, which is a pretty vast and ever-expanding line of Predator action figures. Today I thought I'd turn my attention to another old favourite, which was actually the Aliens vs Predator subline, and in particular the Elder Predator. Now, regardless of how you feel about that film, and for me, I certainly was disappointed upon first release, but it's a film I've come to appreciate more and more across the years as I've got older on subsequent rewatches. But one thing I hope we could all agree on is that the creature design is pretty awesome in that film. I think their predators are really very, very cool, and this one in particular is fantastic. I always loved the addition of this fantastic red cape. Now if we start off by looking at this blister packaging, we can of course see that this is in the days before NECA decided to move away from this sort of traditional design and towards their deluxe box packaging with the folding covers. Now, as much as I love this traditional blister packaging and being able to see the figure on display in that window, I have to say I think their more modern approach with the boxes definitely is much improved. This Predator just looks so cramped in this box right now. I almost feel sorry for him in there. It just doesn't look like he's got the space and presentation that the later figures in their big fancy boxes would have. However, that being said, this is still quite nicely designed. There's still plenty of space on this card. I do like the artwork in the back there that is specific to this film. We can see the Aliens vs Predator on the background there, which is pretty cool. Of course, it is mostly just the figure on display, but we do have the AVP logo at the bottom there, which is pretty nice. Now, if we flip the packaging over, we can still see that consistent branding. We can see the AVP Predator on display, which is pretty cool. There's a little bit of text about the film and the character, and at the bottom we can see the other figures in this wave, which I do think is very, very cool, and they are very nicely photographed here, as you would expect from NECA. Now, the thing that really strikes me about their AVP subline is that their predators feel much bulkier, much sturdier, much broader than their counterparts in the other Predator series. And the Elder is no exception. So let's start off by taking a look at his head sculpt. I think this is really tremendously done. As we can see, there's an awful lot of detail here, a lot of fine pieces, which is absolutely fantastic, in particular those tusks there, of course his hair. I think this looks really, really good. I particularly love the addition of the scar on the head, but what really sells this are the phenomenal paint apps. I love how we have some white paint around the edges of the eyes, the colouring of the scar at the top of the head, of course all the other myriad colours that are going on over the various flesh tones there. But what's really striking and unusual about this Predator is the colour in the hair. I love how there's a gradient between black and blue, and that just gives it a lot more texture and vitality than we've seen in previous releases. NECA deserve massive amount of respect for this fantastic sculpt. I love how this spared no attention to detail. This is littered everywhere you look. There is some fantastic sculpting going on and wonderful paint apps on top of it. Look how we have this bandana here with individual details such as the skull, for example. Again, individually painted. All these different pieces and parts just look fantastic, and it's hard to know where to begin to look because there's so much on offer here, and it all looks wonderfully textured and realised and as if it's very real and authentic. I think they've done an incredible job. Just soak this in for a moment. If you just try and take in all of these details on the belt, on the body armour, on the skin underneath, it's just littered with details. Absolutely phenomenal. He even has a metal chain for his cape at the top of his neck, which I think is just a really nice, lovely little touch. He has just the one pair of hands, one open hand and one closed gripping hand, but again, very nicely painted, well sculpted. And on his gauntlets, you will see that on one gauntlet he has the spikes. Now these are not retractable, these simply pull out, so you can have these without, but to be fair, you're probably always going to want to leave them in because it just looks better, it looks weird without them. And then on his other gauntlets, of course, he does have that lift up folding panel there as well, which is very cool. And then of course he has this fantastic cloth cotton cape as well, which is actually quite thick. Now it's not posable, there's no wire on it, which is a real shame because that is a missed opportunity, but this looks really, really good. It's nicely ruched at the top of his shoulder there, so there's no danger of this pulling apart or coming away. And overall it looks pretty cool, it's pretty tight fitting in the main, so it doesn't really flow particularly, but you can do with it pretty much whatever you want because of course it's not rigid, which is definitely my preference over something like plastic or rubber. Looking at the articulation, well, there is a swivel at the top of the head, so he can move his head from side to side. Now, there's a little bit of give when it comes to wobbling it side to side or nodding it up and down, but I don't really feel that this is intentional, and it doesn't really have an awful huge range of motion here. So really, you're kind of limited from side to side. Now he does have ball joints in the shoulders, so his arms will kick up and out, which is great. Of course, there's a complementary bicep swivel at the top there as well, double joints at the elbows, and then a pin swivel at the wrist, allowing that hand to rotate all the way around and hinge forwards and backwards. Now there is a ball joint in the upper torso, so he can move from side to side and just about wobble from side to side, and that's about it. He can't really bend forwards or backwards too much. Now he does have ball joints in the hips, so of course his legs will kick out to the side. These can also be turned at the top of the leg there to move it from side to side. The legs will kick forwards, backwards, and there's a double joint at the knee. Now there's also a swivel at the top of this knee as well, so he can bend that lower leg from side to side, and there's another ball joint at the ankle here, allowing this foot to, again, move from side to side and hinge forwards and backwards. Sadly, he is pretty light on accessories, but he does come with his face mask and his staff. The faceplate is really cool, again nicely sculpted, a lot of detail on here. Just look at that little skull underneath there. I think that's really nicely done, and again fantastic paint taps on there as well. Looks really good from the front, but also if we flip it and look at the back, again we can see lots of extra detail, some nice red light going on there. I think this looks really good, really nice to see this level of care going into this. I think it looks fantastic all in all, and of course he can hold it in his grip with no issues either, so we can create some nice poses with him removing this faceplate. His staff is also really nicely done. There's a lot of detail on here. We can see a lot more blades coming out of this, so it looks pretty sharp. I really like the extra paint taps that we can see as well of the sort of various bits of rope and string that have been wrapped around this and coiled around. It looks really good. It looks very interesting. It's eye-catching. The silver they've used for the actual staff itself is very shiny, so it catches the light just right. So I think this looks really good. The only complaint I would have is that the plastic they've used is very brittle. As you can see, mine is actually snapped off there. Of course, it should be fully extended both sides. Mine has lost one end because it's just snapped off when I've been trying to get it into his grip. And that would be my other criticism, is that it's not easy to get into his grip at all. His grip is far too tight to hold this particular accessory. But when all is said and done, this is another really strong entry for the Predator line. This AVP subline is very well done with their Predators. I really like how strong and sturdy these guys are. And the Elder Predator in particular is just absolutely showered in detail and wonderful paint taps that make him just instantly eye-catching and just a wonderful marvel to just take in and absorb when you try and look at all his various bits and pieces. I'm still discovering things years later that I've never noticed before on him, and I think that is absolutely tremendous. So full credit for NECA for really producing a really authentic, very detailed figure here. I think it is absolutely top notch. I really love the addition of the cape as well. It gives him a real nice splash of colour that just really makes him pop, and I just think he's tremendously eye-catching, as I said. So, wonderful figure all told. In terms of the articulation, I think it's pretty solid for the most part, and his accessories, they're light, but they're pretty good. The only thing, as I said, I would criticise really is that staff, which doesn't really fit into his grip very easily and is far too liable to snap. But other than that, this is a fantastic addition to the line, and you possibly might just be one of my favourite figures in the Predator line. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.